Hey there. So we're going to burn this Palo Santo as we have a discussion. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I thought it was worth sharing when I found it in my own shadow the other day. I wrote myself an email. Maybe it was just yesterday. Looks like it was just yesterday. Feels like the other day, right? But I wrote myself an email while I was in bed processing this because I knew that I wanted to share about it. Because it was hidden in my shadow for so long. And even though my conscious knowledge knew better, my shadow was still carrying it. And so first of all, I like to share these things when they happen because here I am talking about fair relating dynamics, balancing out energy, looking at the shadow, and I want to be clear that I'm doing it too. I'm always willing to look at my shadow and work through whatever comes up. So when I share, it's sharing because of something I've learned or realized, and that's usually from my own experience, right? Well, I would say it's always from my own experience because even if I've learned something because someone else shared something, I always experiment with it myself. And I always say that I'm just offering a reflection because I think it's important for each of us to be sovereign, each of us to take responsibility for ourselves, and each of us to figure out what works for us, right? Okay, so let's look at what I wrote in my email. This is going to be, first I just wrote a note that said the difference between expectation and holding space. So I want to discuss those things versus preferences. So 3 topics that I'm going to bring up, but it comes from the realization of my own shadow, which I will get into, but let me just read what I wrote here, okay? My follow-up email said, expecting someone to get better, be better, find their way to our understanding is not acceptance. It's expecting, right? And if you have followed along with my talks about fair relating, I've mentioned many times that expectations are not part of it. Because expectations puts a pull or a push on somebody's energy toward what we want. Now, in the case of wanting someone to get better or be better, you might think, like I was thinking, maybe, I actually wasn't thinking about it, but you might let it go under the radar like I did because it seems appropriate to want the best for somebody, right? But in actuality, somebody is on their own path, and any expectation we have of them is inappropriate when it comes to fair relating. We can only be an example, and we can only have our own standards and know what we agree to have in our life or not. Like, our control is over ourselves, not another person. The next thing I say is holding space says, I know there is a higher divine unfolding, and I know they are part of it, so I accept that. Meaning whatever that is, right? Like if their path is going to carry them down another rocky road, and I'm expecting that they won't go down that rocky road because they'll make a better decision because they should know better. You know, who am I to say that the divine plan isn't the best plan for them? You know, it would be kind of silly for me to assume that I knew better than the divine universe who was orchestrating this on their behalf. I can't know better than the universe for them, and I can't know better than them for them. In most cases, I would say. Okay, so and then it says, they will find their way or understand when and if they are meant to. So I have that as one of my cards in my Fair Relating Reflection deck, and I repeated it here in this email to myself. So in my reflection deck, though, I didn't put when and if. I just put when they are meant to. Because I was still holding in my shadow the expectation that someone should always get better, should always grow. Well, some people are here to pass on, right, at an early age because of a certain illness that they're going to experience. Like, that's written in their soul plan. So if should definitely be part of that, and I'm going to have to find a way to update my cards to reflect that. And then I wrote, my preference can be something I desire. Like, but I have to be knowing that that's my preference. Like, I would prefer if they got better. That's okay. However, if another party is involved, I don't have control over them and their path. So I need to check myself. I can only hold my preference as a possibility for them. Nothing more. Not a compulsion, not an expectation. Just a possibility. Right? I can still hold the space of that possibility for them. The biggest picture may include factors that I am not aware of and affect other people in ways I have not thought of. So it would be irresponsible for me to decide the path of another. They must do it themselves. They must learn their own experiences. I can only learn mine, and I may need to learn what it means to think I know best for someone else. Right? Like, the universe is going to have to teach me that I don't know best for someone else if I do carry that belief, right? Expecting that things won't work out to try and avoid disappointment is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, because my expectation is pertaining to my own self, not them, because I have control over myself, not them. So when I flip that and put the expectation on myself that things won't work out, like I hold that as a belief, right? Because maybe I've been disappointed earlier on in life. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's my own belief and I have control over my own beliefs. It's holding expectations. That's how powerful expectations are. So that lets you know that if I hold expectations of myself and for my own life, the universe falls in line to show me what I am expecting. And if I am expecting for somebody else, the universe is going to have to show me why I don't have the right to do that. And what it is to try to have other people interfering with me. Because that's what I'm actually doing to them. If I'm holding expectations, I'm interfering in some way with their energy. Expectations beg to be disappointed sometimes, is what I wrote here, and I believe that's true. You know, it's like, if you're expecting it not to work out, and sometimes it's going to work out, you know, so your expectation may be disappointed in that way. So there's a lot of factors when it comes to manifestation and living out energies and the soul plan and things like that. Expectation and beliefs. So the way this hid in my shadow was that I was carrying a wound from earlier on in my life. Now, I had already dealt with layers of using rose-colored glasses to look at people who were abusive towards me. I've already seen that in myself several years ago. But I guess I didn't get to the root cause of it. You know, I just did a layer of it back then because it came back around. And what I finally actually realized was, while I would put on the rose-colored glasses, not for people being abusive, but for the expectation that they would get better. Right? Like, so I would be well aware if someone was abusive towards me, that, you know, I could see what they were doing up until the point where I was expecting them to get better. That's where my glasses went on, and I was like, yeah, that's fine to do. You know, I didn't see the reality that that's not my place. But at the same time, because I was doing that, I was overlooking my internal subconscious belief that I had adopted at the same time I chose to use that coping mechanism of expecting them to get better and putting rose-colored glasses on to the idea that they wouldn't. I also adopted the belief that I shouldn't expect things to work out because then I can be disappointed. And the reason that I made both of these coping mechanisms, both of these energies lodged in me, was all stemming from a time in childhood when I could not bear to allow myself to feel disappointed. So life had me dealing with people, two in particular, because I would usually just let people go if they would act unfairly towards me, because I have fair relating in my consciousness. But because this was in my shadow, I didn't see it, and these two people I have soul contracts with, and they kept being in my presence enough to disappoint me. And when I say disappoint me, I would expect them to grow and learn. I would hold space for them to grow and learn, but they would just not. They would just always do the same pattern, the same pattern, the same pattern. But my coping mechanism caused me to be resilient to it and go to the place where I expected them to get better. So because my coping mechanism involved me being resilient, I never let myself feel the disappointment of somebody not living up to my expectation of them getting better. Now, first of all, having the expectation, that was one part of the equation that was off. But second of all, being resilient and not letting myself feel the feeling of disappointment meant that I could never see it because I was too busy bouncing back. I was skipping right over any feeling that could have arisen. So what happened was my health started to get affected because this shadow was a heavy, burden. Like that energy was in me and I was carrying it with me. And, I thought it was that the situation was finally weighing me down, that I was just took too much from these two particular people who were relating with me unfairly, but that I felt like I had a responsibility for in both cases. And when my body was starting to be in pain, it finally caused me to surrender my resilience and just be in the restful state. And while I was in that restful state, I was finally able to see the pattern for what it was, and then realize all at once that, if it's not working out the way I want, I must believe that it's not going to work out. That's one. And two, if I believe it's not going to work out and it keeps not working out, what is the feeling that's associated with that? Oh, it's disappointment. Oh, I haven't let myself feel disappointment. Darn, what I've been doing instead was being resilient, but now that I can't possibly be resilient, I'm finally able to see it. So I used my cards to help me find it, and that's how I knew where to look. So it didn't kind of just pop into my head that way. It was that I used my oracle to kind of ask a few questions, and then my oracle showed me very plainly and led me to the realization. So that was pretty magical for me because it unlocked so much, and immediately my body pain eased. Immediately I felt better in health, and I knew that was one of the main anchors of that energy that was burdening me and trying to get my attention. And I couldn't believe that I was holding this hidden way that I was excusing my expectations because it was I was expecting them to get better. It's no, actually that was me wishful thinking in a way, because I felt like if I had to deal with these people, then they had to be better. But simultaneously believing that it wouldn't work out for the best. So it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but also it was going to repeat until I allowed myself to feel and be present with the feeling of being disappointed, of feeling disappointed. Not because it was appropriate for me to expect of and be disappointed in others, but because it was holding space for a childhood wound in me where I felt disappointed. And I wasn't able to be present with that feeling. And I believe it was a time when I was very overwhelmed with a lot of other feelings, and that's why in the overwhelm I chose that coping mechanism of deciding a way to never be disappointed again and to just move through it. It's like, well, if I'm not going to be disappointed about it, I guess being resilient about it makes really a lot of sense. And if I have to deal with these people, I guess putting the rose-colored glasses on towards what they've done also makes sense. So I would like let go of the past, give them a fresh slate every day, and expect that they would get better in my conscious mind, while my subconscious expected them to never get better. So, and even I would experience with one of them that they would flip between treating me good and treating me poorly. So it was like they would reflect both energies, whichever was more active in me at the moment. It was quite interesting. And so now on to the task of updating the decks that are out there with the more accurate representation of they will find their way or understand when and if they are meant to. Because I think that's a very important distinction. And I think for right now there are about, besides mine, there are about 6 decks out there in use. And I know how to contact all the people who have the decks. So that's fortunate because I can replace the card and give them an updated version. And I have given them one other update when I added 2 cards. So it won't be a surprise to them. And we'll get this deck ship shape as we go and as we see things that need to be updated. So that's a fun process for me. And the feedback that I've gotten from them using the deck has been great, so that's felt really nice. And maybe reaching out to them with an updated card is another opportunity for me to ask them how it's going with the deck. So I will be doing that very soon. So if you do have the deck, I'm referring to the Fair Relating Reflection deck that I sell on my website. I will be giving an update to that particular card. And I'm so thankful to be free of that particular shadow of mine, because it was quite a treacherous pattern to live out for an extended period of time. And plus, now that I've released it, things can work out. When and if they're meant to.